What does the largest franchisee on the planet look like? Greg Flynn and the Flynn Group owns 2,356 restaurant franchise locations. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I wanted to share a story that was brought to my attention just recently, and I thought it was fascinating. So I wanted to share it here because one of the biggest, misconceptions that I run into as I'm talking to people about franchise ownership and, all the many different opportunities within franchising and all the different possibilities that can open up to someone once they make that transition into business ownership, in particularly through franchising. One of the biggest misconceptions is that, franchise ownership is small business opportunities, right? And a lot of times people seem to think that, if you own a franchise, you are essentially buying yourself a job, right? Where you're going to be an owner operator, maybe almost a one man show, one woman show. And that's certainly the case in some franchises, right? Some franchises are designed to be, more of that owner operator model, which can be great for a lot of people, depending on their goals. It can be, a way for them to get out of working for someone else and, get to that place of being self-employed where maybe they have more earning potential than they did before and also have more control of their time and their schedule. That's a great thing. And for a lot of people, that's likely to be a really good fit for them. But, I have this conversation frequently with people that the vast majority of franchises are designed to be scalable. And if you really stop and think about it and understand why the franchising business model works in the first place, it makes a lot of sense because, the franchisor's primary revenue stream in most cases are their royalties. And a royalty is really just a percentage of the franchisee's gross revenue that is getting paid back to the franchisor. So if you think about it from the franchisor's perspective, it's in their best interest to, have a business model where the franchise owners are able to continue growing their business over time, because that's more royalties coming back to the franchisor. And, in order to do that, and in order to continue adding new franchisees to any brand, the franchisor also really needs to make sure that they're providing the right type of support in the right areas of the business and, doing everything within their power to put their franchisees in a position to run a profitable business. Because, growing top line revenue is one thing, making sure that the business is profitable is a totally different thing. And any good franchisor out there realizes that they've got to have happy, profitable franchisees if they're going to have any chance of continuing to grow the brand and continuing to bring in new franchisees to the system. So, kind of understanding that, it makes sense that, again, the vast majority of franchises out there, their goal is scalability for their franchisees, and they're really looking for the types of franchise owners that want to scale their business, have the skill set and the mindset to scale their business, and are going to be able to implement and execute the support that's provided to them in order to continue growing and scaling their business over time. So wanted to kind of establish that, number one, but I also just wanted to highlight here just how big some franchise businesses can get. And, if you've heard any of my wife and I's story, and I've interviewed other franchise owners on the podcast, a lot of times once someone gets into a franchise business, regardless of what the business is and regardless of how they start, whether they're starting with, one unit or location or multiple units, the opportunity to continue growing can be there. And a lot of different doors can start to open, once you're able to make that transition into business ownership. And, hopefully as time goes on and, if you're really executing and building the business the right way, that's going to lead to more financial resources coming in, which can open a lot of doors, right? So it's very common within franchising to see that existing franchise owners are growing their business through going out and acquiring, more territory or more locations, maybe of the brand that they initially started with. But you also very commonly see where franchise owners will branch out into other brands. A lot of times there's, some strategy in how they decide which other brands they may want to get into. They're looking for, brands that have some synergy with, the brand or brands they already own, something that may be complementary in nature. Maybe it's something where they can cross market to their client base or even cross train employees. So a lot of different ways that someone could go about, evaluating, hey, I'm in this franchise today. It's going really well. I want to grow. Maybe I want to, explore becoming a franchisee with other brands. And so, there's countless examples out there of franchise owners that have done just that, to varying degrees. And so today I want to share kind of the most extreme example, that I've come across yet. And, I think I'll do, some more of these videos where I'm just kind of highlighting, really cool success stories of franchisees and essentially empires that they've built. If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. So the one I want to highlight today is a guy named Greg Flynn. And Greg Flynn and his company, the Flynn Group, if the data that I'm looking at is correct, they are, and really he is the largest franchisee on the planet. All right. So what does that look like? What does the largest franchisee on the planet look like? So as of the time I'm looking at this data, Greg Flynn and the Flynn Group owns 2,356 restaurant franchise locations. All right. And the reason this came to my attention, I saw an article. So, to give you a little context and background. So Greg Flynn, this guy's a Stanford business grad, right? Got out of Stanford in 1994. And instead of going into, investment banking or private equity or, working for one of the big Fortune 100 companies or getting into politics, right? Like you see a lot of times, Stanford and other of these prestigious school graduates, that tends to kind of be the career track that you think they go into. He got into franchising. He bought 8 Applebees. That's how he started. And I don't know all the details of how he raised the money or if those were existing Applebee locations or, if he bought the rights to develop 8 units over time. I'd be curious to find out, but I don't know at this time. And so, from 1994 on, as he started, this path to building franchise business, his company grew to the point of having 2,356 locations. All right. And that's not all with Applebee's. Okay. So essentially the Flynn Group has built a portfolio of franchise businesses, primarily within the food sector. The reason this article came to my attention is that very recently they've expanded out of food and into the fitness sector of franchising as well. But up until very recently, exclusively focused on the food sector. And as far as I can tell, his portfolio looks like this: 369 Arby's locations, 192 Wendy's locations, 130 Panera Breads, 441 Applebee's. All right, so that's the brand that he originally started with, 283 Taco Bells, and 941 Pizza Huts. It's a lot of pizza, guys. And then, in this most recent expansion, got into the Planet Fitness franchise with 37 locations. All right. So to zoom out even a little bit further and give you some more context, across all of these franchise locations that the Flynn Group owns and operates, 73,000 employees. All right. So when you think about franchise ownership and you think about, is this going to be just, some small little insignificant business that I'm starting? And, am I really going to be able to have any sort of an impact in, my local community, or in the case of something like the Flynn Group, nationally? Think about this example. And yes, it's an extreme example. We're talking about the largest franchisee in the world, to my knowledge. So yes, extreme example, but as I do more of these videos, and I'd encourage anyone to just go out there and do some research on your own, this is not that rare of an example. There's plenty other massive franchisees just like Greg Flynn and the Flynn Group out there. And you see it a lot in food. It is pretty common in food, but it's also prevalent, outside of the food sector. And, scale this back a little bit, right? Just imagine that you have, 10 locations of a franchise brand and the number of employees that you would likely need to operate those businesses, and the number of clients or customers that you could serve through those businesses. There's a lot of opportunity that can begin to open up once you make that transition into business ownership. And, look, different people are going to have different goals. And I'd be really curious to talk to Greg Flynn and, have him take me back to 1994 when he's just getting out of Stanford and, deciding what he wants to do. I'd love to know what prompted him to go the direction of franchising and how he got involved with Applebee's at the time. And I'd really be curious to know what his vision and what some of his goals were at that time. Did he envision, growing his business to the size that it is today? Or is that something that, he started to get more clear on as he had some success, built some confidence, learned some things. So really, really fascinating. Couple of other things I thought were interesting. Just again for context. So out of the 2,356 restaurant locations that the Flynn Group operates, they are larger than the entire franchise system for several really well-known brands like Cinnabon, like Wingstop, like Jersey Mike's. Really, really interesting. So to me, this is super fascinating. If you can't tell, I nerd out on this stuff, and I could talk a lot more, but I'm going to try to keep these types of videos and podcasts when I do them a little bit shorter, a little more bite-sized. This was brought to my attention by the Wolf of Franchises, who's been a guest on the podcast before. I'll link the article from his newsletter in the show notes here, because he gives a lot more detail and some really interesting history on Greg Flynn's story and his journey to building, the franchise empire that he has today. So quick shout out to the Wolf of Franchises for bringing this to my attention, and highly recommend everyone follow and subscribe to his newsletter. He does a podcast as well. Always has some really interesting information that he's sharing relevant to the world of franchising. So with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, but I hope folks out there listening find this interesting. To me, it's fascinating. And again, this is just one of many, many examples where people have leveraged the franchise business model to quite literally build an empire for themselves, to create massive opportunity to employ others and have a huge impact, in their local economy, but in examples like this, a much larger impact. So I'm going to be sharing more of this. Would love your feedback if you like, this type of, kind of spotlight on, large multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees. Let me know, send me a note saying that you want to hear more of this. Certainly follow, subscribe, share with others that you think may be interested. And just a little kind of sneak peek at some of what's going to be coming along the lines of this video. Many of you may be shocked to hear that franchise ownership is very prevalent with professional athletes, retired professional athletes. So figured it would be fun to incorporate some of that into these videos as well, and spotlight some of the professional athletes that most would know and recognize, and what they've been able to accomplish through franchise ownership as well. So with that, thanks so much for tuning in. Go drop in. Have an amazing week.